So we thank all of you who are here today and all of you who might be joining us online on Zoom and Facebook. And yeah, this will be a very interesting conversation. And it's going to go in lots of different directions, as we always do. So my name is Susan, and welcome to the Celebration of Fine Art Discovery Series on Monumental Sculpture. And I can see Bryce and Ryan through this beautiful piece of Ryan. So from your left side there is Bryce Pettit from Durango, Colorado. And right next to him is Ryan Schmidt, who splits his time between Scottsdale, Arizona and Arkansas. And right next to me is Todd Paxton, who is joining us for the Celebration of Fine Art from New Mexico. So like kind of all over the board here, yay. So each of these wonderful men are sculptors and are artists. They're multi-talented. Todd's actually added some patina paintings, so he has wall pieces and sculpture. But the focus today is really about monumental sculpture, and we're really talking about the identity that we connect with sculpture. How many of you have gone to a destination that there's an iconic piece of sculpture that makes you think of that place? Anyone? What comes to mind? Chicago, the Bean, which is actually called
Cloudgate.
Yes, it's a fabulous piece. What about Cody, Wyoming? The Buffalo Bill piece? Yes, awesome. And even if we go a little bit bigger, we might think of massive monuments. Statue of Liberty, for instance. What about the St. Louis Arch? So for many of us, there's such a sense of place that's driven by artwork. And can you imagine visiting these places if that didn't exist? And we might talk a little bit about the Sistine Chapel and some of the things we talked about yesterday. But so talking about defining a place by the identity of the sculpture. So we're gonna cover all kinds of bases, but why don't you each just tell us a little bit about you and how long you've been in the art business and maybe what got you into it. Starting with you, Bryce.
Okay. Well, I've been here at Celebration of Fine Art for 20 years now. It hardly seems like that, but this is, I believe, my 20th year at the show. I live in Durango, Colorado, and I've been an artist before I knew I was an artist. I've always done it. I've always been drawn to making things, and just it's never left me alone. So that's all I've ever done, really. Go ahead.
Howdy. I kind of like Bryce, I've been into the art world, probably more on a 2D scale since the adolescence. Coming into college, I knew I wanted to study more, so got into photography, ceramics, printmaking, bronze, and then moved into stainless steel sculpture later. I'd say a lot of my interests helped get pushed along because my father had a playground business. So, public work, playgrounds, from the churches to the schools to, lots of different applications for the playgrounds. And so it kind of helped with the application of different materials. I worked in wood, metal, plastic, landscaping. And so that kind of pushed me into the realm of, well, now I can take those skills from the working class and try to create artwork out of that. So it's kind of what got me into it. But second year at the show.
How fun would it be to grow up with your dad making playground equipment, So, that's pretty cool. I just want to comment, we've had people online have requested that we not have our masks on, and I'm going to say it's a delicate balance. We're really trying to adhere to the protocols set forth by our city. So we're going to do our best to just talk through our masks rather than risk doing the wrong thing. So we're going to be in perpetuity living on YouTube for the rest of our lives with masks on for the season, I believe. But we wish we could do that, but we're just really trying to just, what do I say? Stay down the middle, people. Do your job. So thank you. and we'll do our best. Todd.
My name is Todd Paxton. The TLDR, too long don't read, is I've always loved art, but you need to make a living, especially when you have a family. So I've done many other things, and it wasn't until my friend who was working for a sculptor in his foundry, that sculptor was going to close it down, and I said, well, maybe I could buy it and we could do the foundry work for him, and I could finally get to doing art. And he said yes, and I did, and we went into crazy debt, and we finally dug ourselves out of that debt, and doing art was worth it all. And that has been my journey for the last 14 years. I've done this show 5 years, and my career in art was mediocrely going along, and then I did the show, and it's gone up very well. Thank you very much. But I think everyone has a different take on what art is and how they connect with art. And for me, doing other things brings other things into the art and different perspectives. And I think that's such a cool thing to hear the different places of origin that end up bringing different and unique art that everybody can appreciate those different paths to it. And for me, it's always been a love, but now I get to do what I love for work, and there ain't no better job than that.
True statement. That's awesome. Thanks, Todd. So one of the reasons I selected this panel is they each have a little bit different experience in the what we call monumental sculpture and how they got into that realm. Todd did a speculative piece that he made up without somebody commissioning. Bryce has done several public sculpture pieces that I think is really interesting if people understand the backstory of that. So I'd like to have you, Bryce, share a little bit about like your NatureWorks experience and even maybe Art Prize and how that process works to be selected for a public piece of art and what that process might look like.
Okay, so monumental sculpture has my favorite pieces to do. I guess I was going to say it has sort of a mixed love for me. Like my favorite pieces to do are the pieces that sit on the tabletop. You can work on them, you can sit there at your chair and really delve into the composition and everything that goes into them in a very comfortable way. Those are my favorite ones to sculpt. But there's nothing that really compares to producing a sculpture that ends up in a public place as far as the impact that you give to other people. The attraction as a sculptor to be able to really create a space in a community or create a piece that will be part of a landscape is so beautiful to be able to create. But when you do monumental sculptures, they're so difficult. The physicality of sculpting it, I'm exhausted every day that I work on these big pieces. Just the muscle that it requires to move big pieces of clay and to lift and to be up on a ladder while you're creating these pieces. It's not a fun process. But when it's installed and when you're able to do something that really impacts an area and impacts a community, that's very satisfying as an artist to be able to share your vision with a wider group of people. The other thing about monumental sculpture is that many times art is for kind of a select few group of people that can afford to buy it. But when it's in a public space or in a park, you're able to share with everybody, and everybody is able to participate and love and interact with that sculpture. And that's what I really, that really is for my art. So I've always tried to balance my time between pieces that I do for myself, pieces that I love to sculpt, and pieces that I am sculpting for a place. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit off track there, but I've had a bunch of opportunities. I live in Durango, Colorado. Am currently involved in a big community project that my partner and I, Allison Schmidt, are creating for the city of Durango. And we created a monumental sculpture that fills the median coming into town. It's a couple 100 feet of artwork that will be part of the community. I've done pieces for libraries. I've done pieces, Susan was mentioning Nature Works, which is a community in Tulsa, an organization that has dedicated themselves to creating monumental works. And that's been a really interesting process to be able to have a system that is made to create these monumental works and being part of that.
And that whole process, and I know Ryan can speak to it too, with public art specifically, where you have to go through maybe an RFP. I think NatureWorks is more competition oriented. Whoever wins that competition, they will then sculpt a piece that will be placed somewhere around Tulsa. Yours is at the airport, one of them?
Yeah, one of the pieces I did for Tulsa is at the Tulsa International Airport. And as you come into the airport, it's sort of a U-shaped building, a little bit like the Celebration is, and it's right at the entrance. As you're going through security, you come in and the sculpture is there. So to have, hundreds of thousands of people a year be able to see that. Yeah, so what you're saying is part of the application process, and it's really difficult to do, and a lot of backstory that goes into it. Normally when you create a sculpture for an art gallery, you just decide what you want to make, you sculpt it, and you put it out there. But when you're doing a piece for Public Works, you submit designs, you have several interviews, you go talk to them about how you might create that, you submit a budget. It's a very, very involved and very difficult process. Very satisfying, as I said, to be able to create something for that, but it is very labor intensive, and often for artists demands a lot of the organization and professional meetings and all those sort of things that artists are maybe not the most qualified, maybe not, but proficient at. It challenges a lot of things that I'm not super good at.
Not your strong suit, right?
Not my strong suit, although I do my best. But yeah.
So maybe we'll hear a little bit more from you about the Durango project going in the next go around here. But I really respect what you all have gone through to create these. And if you've been around the show for the last few years, we've had Todd up and down, up and down, up and down on ladders. If you had an opportunity last year, Ryan had a work area back in the corner of the parking lot. Now he's got a little bit farther down the road, a work area, because he can't do what he does here. But I'd love to hear, we had a little conversation the other day about maybe what inspired your exact configuration that you do, and maybe talk a little bit about that, and then we can go on to talking about the Governor's Mansion.
Sure. So as an adolescent, I visited the Gateway Arch, the Jefferson Memorial in St. Louis, and I was fascinated by it. As an adult later, I went back and I talked with the managers. They let me get a tour of the inside of the legs, just kind of get a visual to see how everything was put together. And then I made a trip to the City Hall, got a printout of the verbal build on the structure, and just kind of studied that, and found that the triangular form is very strong, and when it's on the curve, it's even stronger. So I ended up trying to perceive my own vision of that and to reproduce my work on a triangular form on a curve. I just kind of ran with that idea. So the majority of my work is in that situation of a similar form, but just as wild as I could sketch it or draw it.
Yeah, you're not very tame. How many of you have been in the St. Louis Arch, the Gateway? Yeah? Once was enough for me. It's very claustrophobic, but what a magnificent feat of engineering, and that's so important to what you do.
Yeah, it was 630 feet tall, and the width is just the same as the height. So the two legs are 630 feet apart, and if they were off by 1/64th 1/4 of an inch, the piece wouldn't line up. So, a lot of, well, when you're referring to large scale, site prep installations, the groundwork has to be laid. It has to be perfect. The foundation has got to be done right. You need engineers involved. There's so many working mechanics to the putting a piece together like that. You've got to, use the best people that are available at your fingertips to help source the situation. Trying to take it all on yourself would be a headache.
So tell them a little bit more about how you do your process.
So I sketch curves, on flat sheet metal using a Sharpie marker. I come back with a 4.5-inch grinder and freehand cut almost everything out. There's been a couple of applications where I've used some laser cutting or plasma, but usually that is it's probably for the much bigger pieces that I can't physically manipulate myself with my hand. And so what I like with the sketching and the drawing, once I've got it into a 2D form, I'm tacking one side of the sketch together, and then the other side I've opened up or pried open, and then I'm using tension on the curves with the straps and clamps to create this triangular form. So if certain parts of the curve are going to have, more tension than others, and that's kind of what the fluid, flow of the piece typically tends to go out in.
And then you get it shiny.
Oh yeah, there's the polishing. Polishing usually takes 3 or 4 times as long as the build process. So probably about 15 steps of sanding from 80 grit sandpaper all the way up to 1500 or 2000 grit. Coarse, medium, fine rouges with cotton wheels and different, textures on the cotton. But when you're all done, the mirror finish, the reflective qualities, the interaction with that as you walk around the piece, reflections change. It's just something that has stuck with me, and it's hard to take off of that after you've gone down that road.
So you had an opportunity to have a piece go to the governor's mansion in Arkansas.
So in 2009, this was a long project, by the way. In 2009, I donated a piece for a benefit, and the purchaser gifted the piece to the governor's mansion, the current administration at the time. The piece was initially exhibited suspended in the foyer in the entrance, and we ended up setting it down at the client's house because they had undetermined where they were going to position it. Anyways, they donated it sitting down, resting on the ground. So it sat there for about 7 years. And the new administration looked me up and figured out, the sculpture is supposed to be hanging. So, many years down the road, I get an opportunity now to present an idea to suspend this thing. So I drew up all kinds of concepts, and eventually we found one that we liked. And there's just a single arch cantilevered out and over and suspended this teardrop piece over a pool of water. The arch ended up weighing about 4,000 pounds. It was cut from 20-foot by 8-foot sheets of stainless 1/4-inch plate. Shipped in from Japan, so it's pretty long process. But just the modeling, the structural engineering, the working with an architectural landscape guy, the pool guy, the electrical for lighting. There's a lot of facets to definitely put together. The concept certainly had a much better effect than sitting on the ground. So I was happy to get it in its rightful position, and it turned into a really cool piece. But from the beginning stages of putting the bid together and the project, it took a year for them to execute it after I submitted my proposal, because the previous administration's committee was not necessarily in the same mindset to do this piece. So that was a long project. So probably almost just under 10 years to get that one together.
Oh, that's a lot. That's a lot. But the one thing I like about all of our artists, but particularly I would say our sculptors, they have no fear. Like and they're full of ideas, many of them very good, but this guy, Ryan, like, can we hang this here? And he comes in, we did a little show over at the Scottsdale Fairmont Princess for Labor Day. And it was like we were there for 3 days, and you wanted to suspend something. So he's a little bit like a monkey, I think. He's always looking for somewhere to hang something. But and I can tell you, just from our courtyard here, in the installation, we should sell tickets to it, because like when these guys start bringing their stuff in, we've got the crane, kind of have to schedule people, not the crane, the forklift. We have had a crane here before with Pete and Cardona's pieces.
Cranes help a lot.
Cranes help a lot, yeah. So the equipment, the moving in, and for just doing this, we try to schedule, like, we couldn't finish Todd's pieces out here until we got Ryan in the corner, and just kind of jockeying all that around is quite something too. But so Todd, it was 4 years ago, you were right in this space, and you just decided, I want to make this big piece. And again, because of the investment in time and money, a lot of these artists, unless they're, like John Coleman, they're not casting massive monumental pieces unless they know they have an end user for it. Well, this guy just decides, I want to make a giant crow warrior. And he had is that a crow?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
He had this size, tabletop size, which I meant to bring ours in because we have the last one of those, but I forgot it. But yeah, so one day you thought, I'm just going to make him giant, and you did. And there's so many stories I could tell about that. And also thinking about Bryce, like when we were moving in your Flights of Learning, which is a piece that Grand Rapids bought for their library. Flights of Learning is 2 kids kind of reading, they have a book open and all these birds flying out of it. Just getting that from the front door down there, it's like 5 guys wheeling it in.
Yeah.
I'm always like, be careful. That's me, I'm the be careful girl. But anyway, back to you. What made you decide that was the piece that you were going to speculatively make this monument?
Well, I knew I was going to do something big because I was in the Aiden spot that first year, and it is itty bitty, and I had too many sculptures. My sculptures were spilling out, and I thought, oh, I've got this big space now. Susan is going to let me do something big. And I wanted to make a splash. I didn't want to come to the show and just be the background noise. I wanted everybody to go, oh, that guy, the guy that did the big, I wanted that to happen. And I didn't quite realize how much effort was going to be involved when I first started. And my wife was like, what are you doing? And I made him so he'd come off in 2 parts. I was like, I got this figured out. I can bring this in. I'll put it in 2 pieces, no problem. And it took 4 guys and everybody to try and get it up on there the first show, and it didn't look like anything at first. And I worked like a madman to make it look like something for most of the show. And it was a bit scary, but what are you going to do? You got to do something cool and big. I love big. Opposed to Bryce's thought about making something I don't like small. That is way harder for me. Give me something I can slap it on big. I did lots of manual labor. Let me do something manual. And the big is so impressive. If you look at my booth, there's nothing that's really small. And if it is small, it was because I had to do something small. It's not because I wanted to have something that sit on your desktop. I want you to have something massive. And there's no easy way to be that guy. These guys are talking about tens of years of fomenting this projects, and then everybody telling you no, not for me. I'm going to do it. You're going to like it or not. And when I get done with it, hopefully you do. And fortunately, so far, it has happened that way for me. The big things, I get someone that's behind it, and they go, yeah, we like it. This guy here, was 2 years ago. It's hard to see him, but now he stands in Santa Fe, is 7 foot tall, 8 foot tall. And it was, nobody said, hey, we want this. I put it out there because most people don't know what they want till they get it. And that's my go at it. I'm not the type of person that enjoys following. I want to be going where I want to go. And if you want to come along, great, let's have a party.
You're the driver. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the innards, because in all of your cases, it's not a solid chunk of clay if you're sculpting in clay or wax. So beneath that, you have sometimes foam. I remember when Bryce did his giant buffalo, we had this pink foam everywhere. So you can talk about armature or like what's underneath, and then how much clay. And both Bryce and Todd can talk about that. And then dismantling, like your Indian, he had to chop him in half to get him out the door at the end, and then he had to reassemble him. It was scary. But you want to take that?
Yeah, so I'll just jump in real quick. Yeah, so when you're doing a tabletop piece, you're able to just do a small little sculpture. Gravity doesn't have to be as an important factor as when you get larger. And so the first step in doing any sculpture this large is to create, at least for me, unless you are the man of steel like Todd, is you create what's called a maquette. And so you make a miniature version, and usually you can figure out all the design, composition issues, kind of plan it out, create something that looks exactly what you have in your mind. When you go to the bigger pieces, it becomes much more of an engineering process. And, you know, Ryan and Todd are both, you know, in some of their stories, you're both working with the venue where it's going to be. You have this idea, and then you work your way backwards, trying to figure out how to make that happen. Sometimes you run against very difficult problems. Gravity just gets in the way with all sorts of things, you know, and the strength, and then what Susan was talking about, to make it, to scale it up. And I brought these two pieces. This isn't, you know, a monumental piece necessarily, but I did work out a lot of what I wanted to do with the miniature one. And then
That would be a great monument, though, by the way.
I would love to do it larger, but then you start to build a structure underneath. And yes, you use steel, you use foam, whatever you need to do.
Can we pass it around?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
This is.
So you can compare that to the big one. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I got.
No.
Well, I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. This project that I've been doing in Durango, we've had our committee meetings are the city engineer, the Department of Transportation, the arts committee, the artists. It's a very collaborative work. And I feel like sculpture in general is something that requires a lot of collaboration, because if you add up all the time that goes into, say, Ryan's piece with all the shining and everything, it's several 100,000 hours. So as an artist, you can do all those several 100,000 hours yourself, but then you're creating one piece a year. Or you can do the design, you can do the sculpting, you can get some help with the production, the welding, some of the engineering things by the best professionals that are out there. I'm not able to do, I can weld, but I'm not a very good welder. So I feel like I'm better off to find someone who is the best at what they do, have them help me, and together we create a monumental piece and something that is beautiful and lasting.
And people might be surprised to know too that many of the sculpture, the bronze castings, are not all done in one piece. They're put back together. And Paul Reimer is another like brilliant problem solver. And something just flashed in my mind. I remember he did something, and then he tried to scale it up, and found that he had to really alter the composition even though he was making, from a maquette, he was making the scale, the way your eye sees it changed.
Yeah, gravity really does find a way to mess with you.
Darn gravity.
Somehow you can't like suspend several thousand pounds on a 1-inch base. Somehow.
Right.
Although we do try to push that.
But you do have, like, for instance, the fish piece. How many pieces was that cast into, and then how was it assembled?
That was cast in 5 or 6 different pieces, and then you weld them together. This one's not too bad. It's structurally a circle is a very stable and strong form. One of the more interesting big monumental pieces I did was a full, like twice life-size pelican that was installed on a nature walk overlooking the Arkansas River. And it was a pelican. It was flying with one wingtip touching the ground and the other going straight in the air. And it all came down to a single 3-inch column of stainless steel. And it was suspended on a big steel beam that hung over the river 12 feet out and went into a socket where that stainless steel pin was inserted. That was quite an engineering feat to be able to have it be strong enough, especially given in Arkansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas on the brain because of Ryan. But a few years after it was installed, it hit the fringing edge of a tornado that passed through there. So you have to build knowing that kind of weather event can happen.
The 400-pound Jumpman Test.
That's it. I was just telling the foundry about that the other day. I'm like, you remember, I always say the 300, but 400-pound jump is better. They're like, oh, I haven't heard that rule. I'm like, oh yeah, think of a 300-pound drunk guy climbing all the way to the top of it. It will happen.
That's happened out here.
Yes, I've seen that.
Imagine, it was during the Phoenix Open. Somebody tried to get on Jason Napier's horse piece that was out front.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I have some good stories.
Yeah. The things we have to think about. Okay. So, Todd, your piece, the Warrior, which is right outside, for those of you who are here, you can go up close and personal with him. One day, sometimes they're just like kids. I walked through here and he was in clay. Pretty well, he wasn't fully complete, but he was pretty far along. And they're playing clay darts. They were throwing clay pieces to see if
His
it
belly
would
button made a really great target.
yeah, okay. So, but anyway, that piece ended up, you had, I think, 3 people in advance put their name on the sheet to take that. And one of them, we got to go with you and deliver at Big Cedar Lodge down close to Arkansas, down at the southern border of Missouri, for the resort property that Johnny Morris of Bass Pro Shop owns. And if you haven't been before, when you go to Springfield, Missouri, go to the Bass Pro Shop and the Wonders of Wildlife Museum that Johnny has put together. It's unbelievable.
The museum and the top of the rock.
And the
too,
museum
is
at
outstanding.
the top of the rock was to die for. Natural History Museum, that it features many of his arrowheads that he collected. And he's an avid art lover, supporter, collector, wants to share it with everybody. But he's really funny because we spent a good deal of time working with I was watching. Jake and Todd were working and sweating. But the landscaper depicted a rock, and we spent all this time and we got it placed. It was massively amazing, magnificent.
Right
and
at
then
the gate to the big properties,
Right.
smacked in front of the gate.
like when you're driving in, but it was on the right side, which was the top of the rock entrance, and the left side is the Big Cedar Lodge entrance. And we're all done, and Todd's ready to put the glue in.
Yeah, we're gonna epoxy this down now, right? And they say, oh no, we're not gonna put this down permanently until Johnny sees it. And then when Johnny sees it, he'll make up his mind, and he'll probably change it. And he did.
So they moved it from there to inside the gate, in between the 2 driveways, so that if you're going to the lodge or the top of the rock, you would see it. But
It's a much better spot. It's on the top of a dome of a big rock hill, and he stands silhouetted. So yeah, it's a very cool spot.
yeah, but it is fun it's fun to go traveling and to see artwork from these magnificent artists around the country in different places. It always makes us feel like proud parents a little bit, but that was really quite the thing. And you know, I've seen both of you, but for sure, Bryce has pulled in the parking lot many times with trailer with large pieces on the back, covered in snow one time. And what's it like driving across country? I mean, I was behind you, so I know what that was like. But
it was fun because the Crow, we put him. There's less rub, there's less problems if he stands up and he's strapped down standing up. So it looks like he's got these straps holding him down, and he is staring at you right in your face as you're driving behind him. So it's really cool looking when you're driving it. Everybody drives by real fast, and then they slow down. And I'm like, what are you? And then they come by and their phones are all out in the passenger side. They take a video. It can get frustrating because you get stuck behind slow people and you want to get over, but everybody's stuck right next to you because they're all taking pictures.
Oh, I completely agree. Like, it's sort of satisfying. Your first little bit, you're like, yeah, this is cool. I'm taking it, and then you're like, will you get out of my blind spot? And I want to fill up at the gas station in under 45 minutes. I don't want to talk to everybody. It gets really frustrating. It's fun. I don't mean to sound too gathered about it all, but you're like,
it is cool.
Quit riding in my blind spot.
But you're celebrities.
Yeah.
You're celebrities. And then Ryan shows up the first time here with this swoosh piece out in the courtyard, packed in blankets and stuff in the back of your truck. So you didn't have the benefit of, you know, driving like the crowd wave.
I did bring it over to the hangar at the Scottsdale Airport after the show. And yeah, lots of cars, lots of attention because I had it straight on a flatbed and it was just going down the road. So it's a good.
This year too?
It's
Yeah.
also a good reason to get pulled over. Yes.
Yeah. You're drawing attention to yourself. So so anyway, your warrior ended up at a public viewing location at Johnny Morris's Big Cedar Lodge, and then you took another one up to a private collection. And I know you've installed plenty of large pieces in private collectors. All of you have. Even that can be quite a process, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because that guy, he's 800 pounds. There's no picking that up. And so you've got to schedule, okay, I got to have a forklift there or a crane operator to come and place it. The pedestal that it's going to sit on has to be pre-made and in concrete. And then you've got to have all of your tools to be able to set that. The one I did in Kansas City, Kansas, was they had their pool, beautiful pool with waterfalls coming down around it off this wall, and they wanted it up on top next to the waterfalls, so they kind of waterfalls poured on either side of them. But that was through this steep backyard, and I got a little forklift to be there, and he had his contractor guy, and I thought, this guy's going to drive the forklift in and I'll direct him. And he's like, it's all you, buddy. And so I'm driving the forklift. Luckily, one of the jobs I did, I drove a forklift a lot. So I was able to drive this forklift in the back. But then I'm like, okay, maneuvering around, and it is where all the water comes off at this hillside. And where they had ridden their little Bobcat back and forth was nice. And I went right off of the boat into this mud, and it sunk that little, it was a off-road forklift, but it buried it to the axle. Now I've got the sculpture hanging off of the zoom boom, and I'm stuck in there, and I'm like, oh, because he can't stand up by himself until he's pinned down. And it took a lot of digging, and it was Kansas City, Kansas in the summer, and it was hot. And I was a mess by the time we were done getting that forklift out of the mud and finally got him placed. It was a bit of a wreck, but it happened. It was all good. Anything's possible.
Anything's possible. I bet you were wishing that Jake could come on up there with you. We thought about it, but we didn't. So yeah, there's so many backstories that really make it fun. So what would a dream project be? None of you thought I would ask this question, but if you, like, what would your dream monumental installation thing be? Like, oh, I know that I've made it when I'm here. Ryan?
To go as big as possible. Yeah, I mean, to do something St. Louis Arch size, it'd be great. That's a big undertaking, but I might get one in my lifetime, maybe, if I'm lucky.
How many years did the arch take? Do you remember?
I think it was, what, 20 years in, from Errol Saarinen had won the award, and then by the time it got completed, it was, he had died 4 years earlier, so he never saw it in completion. But yeah, long time.
Well, let's keep you around for a while. So a massively big, is there any particular location that you would want to have your work?
So, I mean, kind of an answer to your question, it's not so much about, I think the dream of a lot of artists is to be able to feel like you've contributed something to society or to a community. And for me, I had the chance to do that flight to learning piece that Susan was talking about in the town that I grew up in, at the little library that I grew up as a kid. So my dream as a sculptor is to be able to provide art or provide what it is that I do as an artist and have it be a central feature of the town and have it be part of that community. Like you referenced the piece in Chicago, and that's iconic of the town. To me, that's what I think is the dream as an artist, is to create something that is not just in the town, but part of the community.
Very well said. And I think the collaboration that you and Allison, that you might want to expand on that a little bit, what you've done, how that process worked, and when might we be able to see that?
Well, yeah, so we're creating a piece of artwork for our hometown in Durango. It's a little different than some of my other sculptural work in that it's more the synthesis of the community itself. We designed it so that all of the community was able to contribute ideas, contribute what they wanted to be a part of it, and it's sort of a mosaic of images and themes that reflect the community. Kids, and from all the schools, high school, elementary, to anyone in the community was able to submit ideas and or images, and we synthesized them into this big, long, 200-foot long piece that will go into the community. Because of the COVID thing and all the disruptions that's caused, it was put on hold just as it was supposed to be installed last spring. It's planned now for this coming spring, and we'll see. My hope is that it will become part of the community, it will become a central feature of that. But we'll see. It's not only what you create, but how the community embraces that too. So hopefully that'll happen. We'll see.
Dream project. Well, there's a podcast I listened to, and the most recent one was about the Colossus of Rhodes and what we know about the Colossus of Rhodes, because it's gone. It fell over in an earthquake 50 years after it was made, and it laid there for 200 years and was one of the 7 wonders of the world. We don't have wonders of the world now. We have destinations. We've got the Eiffel Tower, or St. Louis Arch, the Statue of Liberty, which was made by a guy who was a giant fan of the Colossus of Rhodes, and its design is full on after the Colossus of Rhodes and what was known about it. His whole idea, he tried to get it done at where the Red Sea meets the Mediterranean. He wanted that to happen right there. He was working at it. He was going to make a big giant monument no matter what. There's in South Dakota, there's a 50-foot Native American woman with a big blanket. Looks like that is an amazing feat, because it's all stainless sheets that have been pounded into shape. And it's a giant sail right next to a canyon with gale force winds all the time. What a feat. But yeah, I would really enjoy an amalgam of what was just said there. The giant, massive, bigger it is, the happier I am. And the connection that happens, the recognition of people connecting with it. Because even the little girl in front of the bull on Wall Street is a famous sculpture, and she is like 3 feet tall. She's itty bitty. She's not really a monument, but everybody knows that sculpture because that artist, she was also not chosen by the city to do that.
Tell that story.
So neither of those sculptures, both of those sculptures were artists going, I'm going to do this and they're going to like it or not. The guy who made the bowl, he was not commissioned by the city. He made the bowl at night. He rolled in there, had all his buddies pick it up and take it off the trailer and place it and ran away. It sat there for 2 days and the city was like, we got to get this out of here. We can't stay here on this little triangle by Wall Street. And they took it away. And the people at Wall Street were like, we love that. That symbolizes what we do and who we are. We want it back. And they campaigned to get that sculpture back. And it's been there for a long time now. It was just him trying to get his name known. And now he's known for that. What's funny is he got mad because the woman who made the Defiant Girl, I forget what her name is she did that in front of the bull as a statement, and he got mad because she did the exact same thing. She rolled in at night, she placed that sculpture, nobody knew it was going to happen. You could call it street art because it was temporary and her mind was never going to be able to stay. But when it was taken away, everybody freaked out because they loved it, and thus they put it back, and now it is a staple of New York City, which is the busiest city in the world, and everybody knows that sculpture. For me, I mean, bigger's better, obviously, but I would really love it if I didn't go through all of the typical chain of getting a sculpture made in a place, but I did it, and everybody went, yeah, we love that, keep that, and it would stay. That's what I would say.
I guess that's what I'm kind of like getting at, is that is when you really feel like you've done it, is that it's not about that the community embraces it so much that they do not want that gone. Like, you can't take it away. The community, and once you put it out there, that's the other thing that's very different about monumental sculpture, is once you put it out there into the community, it no longer belongs to you solely. It is part of them. And when the community and the town and the place owns it in their own minds, you don't get to decide exactly how it's presented and how it's interpreted, and it is assimilated into the community. That, to me, I think is the most beautiful part of what art is that you now change the place.
Change the place. I like that. Yeah. I have to say, I feel really blessed and honored to be surrounded by all of you, and to watch the evolution of all of your work. I mean, Ryan, this is only the second year, but I feel like that evolution is constant in really good artists, and I love the energy that comes from listening to and watching these artists, and the way that everybody lifts each other up to be better is really, really impressive. And
we call this art camp. This is an art show, and it's for you to come and see and enjoy and make connections, but we call it art camp because we come and we meet our friends and we talk about art and we get inspired, and you go, you did that? That's amazing. What can I do that's amazing? And you try harder.
Yeah, that's true. And I'm on a committee with the National Sculpture Society, and it's really fun to go to those gatherings too, and just like watch everybody watch each other and get ideas and share ideas. And I think that the enrichment that comes from art, whether we know it or not, and last week we were talking about, you don't look at the table and go, well, there's the leg and there's but the feeling that you get from watching and learning and experiencing art is what really, that's the community that you're talking about building. And I don't know, it's an amazing process, and I'm happy to be part of it with all of it. So,
Well,
go ahead.
and I'm sorry, one more thing. Like that is the purpose of art, right? Is to change how you feel, to change what you see in the space. Artwork in a room changes it from being blank walls to a beautiful, soulful place. And we feel that here as artists, we're able to change and better ourselves by being around this and being around other artists. Art in public places changes the community and makes it better. That's really what art does, is it changes what's around it.
And when you think about like Wall Street, how many people have taken a picture next to the bull? Like, I mean, the patina is worn off and people stand in line and wait. And, you know, Cody, I think it's Vic Payne has the bench with Buffalo Bill Cody, and how many people have sat down and taken a picture next to him? And, you know, those are the memories that people are making from the work as well. And Scottsdale has some great public art. I think we have room to grow, but I love I love seeing how we have placed it very thoughtfully in certain places, and I love that it's part of any building. 1% of the budget, you probably know this, Ken, has to go to public art. So anytime a new building, like we've got the new Nationwide building, 1% of their budget has to go to art. And sometimes that leads to picking something very safe because people don't want to make a statement that might, offend somebody. But we've got down at Main Street, we have the jackknife. The Edmel jackknife. Yeah. I love, somebody asked me one time what my favorite public art is, and for me, it's always going to be George Antognoni's horses down at the Scottsdale Mall, which I think we're renaming that to something else, but because I spent so much of my first years when I moved here in that area, and I was fascinated by that. And so it's just really, whether we think about it or not, the art has such a big impact. So do we have some questions for these wonderful men? Deanna?
Well, Ken and I love bronzes, and we love people that do bronzes. But you talk about placing them, but because we know so many bronze artists, you didn't talk about getting it there. I mean, let's talk about. I mean, we know some artists that do monuments and how they transporting on flatbeds and had to get it there and set it up. I mean, I hear you talking about setting it up, but you sculpt it in your studio and then you have to get it there. And
That can be problematic. I had, for example, the pro that's standing out there, he came in clay here. He was easy to put on. Boop, we put the top on him. I started sculpting, and probably about 500 pounds of clay went on him, and taking it off wasn't the same thing. Taking the top half off. Moved it to Santa Fe. Well, I had made him with a seam and the armature so that it sleeved together so that I could slide off the top and the top could ride on another cart so I could fit it into my trailer. Got it to Santa Fe, bunch of guys up on top, great, got it done. When it was all finished, it was ready to go to the foundry. Out of the gallery, the top comes off again. And he was right about his belly button, sliced off, set on another cart, rolled into the trailer, strapped down really good. I think Monticello, I got there, pulled into a gas station, and thought, I'll just check and see. He's riding okay. And I opened the door, and that top section was on his back, and his head had ripped off, and the bird was gone, and the shield was smashed. I just spent, 9 months working on this to get it there, and it was all beat up. And I got to the foundry and had to spend days and days of putting him back together. But once he was all together, hey, great, off we go.
You made him the first time, you can make him again. Yeah. But yeah, then the transporting, you know,
Cross country.
across the country. Did you assemble those
Pelican.
in place in Tulsa, or did you like send it?
The engineering for the bar that was cantilevered over the river was done in place, and then I took the Pelican out. My ongoing joke is that what I really do for a living is I wear out pickup trucks. And, the art just supports that very bad habit. So.
Ditto that.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times people are on the way here and my transmission dropped out. They got a big load, so yeah.
I did a commission. It's been years and years ago, maybe the first year I was here at the show, and drove back down to Arizona to get the clay approved, and my air conditioning went out, and when I opened the trailer door, a river of melted clay flowed over the threshold. So, yeah, there's all kinds of great stories.
Logistics. You got to think that through,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. But that's good. Yes, Ken.
Bryce, tell us about the sculpture at Tulsa Airport. What is it?
So that was a really wonderful project. That was it's the state bird of Oklahoma is a Scissortail Flycatcher. So we ended up doing these two Scissortail Flycatchers, which are these beautiful birds with long streamer tails, and I did them in their courtship dance where they're kind of swirling together and really accentuating the long tail feathers. The whole piece is about 14 feet high, and it's on this motorized base that moves very slowly. When you look at it, you can't really tell it's moving, but when you look back again in a moment, it's changed position because it's kind of a spiral composition. And as you come through security, they have this wall of glass windows, and the scissor tails are silhouetted against those windows. That was a really fun one to do. Installation on that, by the way, was very difficult because it was behind a security gate. So if you forgot to roll a duct tape, if you forgot a screwdriver, you have to go back out, you have to bring it in, they have to open up your case of the drill and make sure you don't have anything else other than drill bits. And anyway, it was pretty exciting. It was a fun one to do.
I can't wait to see that one. Yeah. And you had maquette size of both of those, right? Are they all
for
sold
sure.
out?
Yeah, it is. I do maquettes of every piece that I sculpt. So,
For us normal people to be able to have?
Well, for me, it's a lot easier to be able to figure out all the composition and the layout in a smaller size, and then be able to do it larger after that. The monumental size ones to me are much more of an engineering project instead of an artistic design project. I'm just figuring out a way to enlarge it from there.
There's lots of different ways to go from that maquette to the big. You can sculpt it and then sculpt completely again. You can sculpt it, you can point it up with a pointing machine, which is like, there's different types of pointing machines, but from that little size and with a machine that transposes a point in space to another point in space, allows you to remake that piece big. There's computers that you can scan it, and it will carve it out of a piece of foam that's a faithful rendering of what was there, but now it's in foam, put some clay on it and resculpt that. There's lots of different ways to get from the small to the big ways, but I think it was mentioned earlier, there's always a danger of what looks just right small can look ridiculous big, and you didn't realize that you had messed up with proportion, and now that little tiny mistake is now a giant mistake that you have to fix.
Yeah, I run into that a lot. Like, maybe a better sculptor wouldn't have that problem, but I can see my very tiny flaws in a very big way.
And you just get bigger scissors to cut your.
Well, I've done both. I've started with the small maquettes, and then I've also had 5 by 12 foot sheets of stainless where I've just said, okay, I'm going to do this for the first time as big as I can on the sheet. So maximizing a 12 foot scale of a 5 foot width, and who knows what's going to happen until you get in the mix. It can be hairy or it could go smooth. It just, that's the adventure.
gotta roll with it, right? Any more questions from anyone? Okay. So if anybody has a project that you're working on and you need help spending your 1% budget, we can help you out here. We can create some massively awesome work.
Who has 2 thumbs and can spend 1%? This guy.
You know how to make that 1% go, right? Well, and of course, all of us who are just regular people, we can take home the size that works in our home as well. But thank you so much, you guys, for sharing. Bryce Pettit, Ryan Schmidt, Todd Paxton. They're all relatively close to where we are. Todd's studio is right here. Ryan's is right here. You're gonna have to walk a few more steps to get to Bryce's on the 10th. Straight ahead, you'll run into their work. So I do hope that you take the time to see their work in their studios, and also outside we have a large Ryan Schmidt piece and a big warrior and a chief head and a spinning ballerina. He doesn't just do Indians, he does other figurative things as well. That would be Todd. So thank you all for joining us today, and we hope that you learned something new and have been inspired. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Cheers.